for the conference, and it's my great pleasure to be chairing that session. As you know, our first keynote is Jim Neal, and throughout his career, Jim has made an outstanding contribution to the library and information industry. If you have a look in the conference handbook and the website, you'll see his full biography, and I've just I'm going to read to you an abbreviated section from that. Jim has served as the Vice President of Information Services and University Librarian at Columbus University from 2001 to 2014, providing leadership for university academic computing and a system of 22 libraries. His responsibilities included the Columbia Centre for New Media Teaching and Learning, the Centre for Digital Research and Scholarship, the Copyright Advisory Office, and the Centre for Human Rights Documentation and Research. Previously, he served as the Dean of University Libraries at Indiana University and Johns Hopkins University, and held administrative positions in the libraries of Penn State, Notre Dame, and the City University of New York. Jim is a member of the OCLC Board of Trustees, and he serves on the Council and Executive Board of the American Library Association, and he recently completed a 3-year term as their Treasurer. He has served on the board and as President of the Association of Research Libraries, on the board and as Chair of the Research Libraries Group, and on the board and as the Chair of the National Information Standards Organisation, and on the board of the Digital Preservation Network. He's also participated on numerous international, national and state professional committees, and is an active member of the International Federation of Library Associations. He is also a member of the Library Advisory Board and the University of the People. So you can see he's a very busy person. Jim is also the President-elect of the American Library Association, so it's a great privilege to have him here at our conference. The title of Jim's keynote presentation today is The 21st Century Information Professional, Chaos Breeds Life. Could you please welcome Jim Neal?
Good morning. It's an honor to be a speaker, to open your conference, and to spend some time considering with you the context, the nature, and the priorities for our work as information professionals in the 21st century. In the education of Henry Adams, it is noted that chaos breeds life. And I will argue with you today that our information profession is full of life. I went to Columbia in the fall of 2001, and I quickly agreed to give a series of presentations to alumni groups around the New York region. That January, I found myself driving through the snow down the New Jersey Turnpike to a program in Philadelphia to meet with the alumni who lived in that area. I found my way into Philadelphia, parked the car at the hotel, walked into the hotel, found the room, set up somewhat like this. My presentation was scheduled to begin at 8 p.m. By 8:15, there was only one other person in the room. I suggested that I should proceed with my talk, and he agreed. I was using slides, and I asked him if he would show the slides as I spoke, and he agreed to do that. My talk, it was an extraordinary talk that night. I remember it well. I finished and asked if there were any questions, and he said no. I sat down in the front row, and I said, you know, I have this long ride back to New York City. It's snowing, and I really need to get on the road. He says, no, you don't. You're going to stay. So I said, no. I've got meetings in the morning. I can't take a chance that I'm going to get hung up on the road. I need to get back to New York. He says, no. You've got to stay. I said, you don't get it. I've got a terrible ride back to the city, and I need to get out of here. He says, no. You don't get it. I'm the second speaker. So I'm very thankful that you've showed up here this morning. I have noticed that over the last several years that my presentations at professional meetings have become somewhat more alarmist and strident. I have subscribed to the Emerson adage that sometimes a scream is better than a thesis. Prognostic exercises, looking at the future, offers opportunities to set aside reason, to avoid evidence, and to speculate with abandon. Library futures and our futures as information professionals, I think, are particularly difficult to define, as the community of interest can be very narrow and the implications of error are quite modest. As Ken Kesey, who you might recall was the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, once noted, you can count the seeds in the apple, but you cannot count the apples in the seed. And to me, that is our challenge today. Libraries have entered a period of gross mutability, a state of constant change, of productive and powerful chaos, of hybrid strategies and maverick structures, of radical shifts in professional staffing, of massive leadership turnover, and of essential creativity in advancing our individual and our collective visions. There are, in my view, three essential elements. First, we must have hope, believe in and aspire to our expanding relevance and impact. Second, we must achieve power to have authority, influence, and respect in the communities that we serve. And third, we must focus less on ideas and more on action, getting things done. The two things that I think are most important to advance are primal innovation, a basic commitment in our field to risk and experimentation, and to radical collaboration, deep and systemic partnerships that move us beyond our traditions of kumbaya. There's a lot going on in the world that we would define as the working space of information professionals in the 21st century. Our users are bringing to us extraordinary behaviors and expectations. We continue largely to maintain redundant, inefficient library operations, aging service paradigms. We're putting increased emphasis on unique resources, but we also need to achieve scale and network effects through aggregation and try to find ways to build more collective innovation. There are many trends that you could identify from your experience working as an information professional. And here on the second slide, I've posted some that you can review. Clearly, the open content movement. Clearly, the importance of collective intelligence. Clearly, the economic context in which we are trying to achieve our goals as information professionals. The information policy wars that we are going to be facing, not only in the United States, but on a global scale. So all of these trends and issues that I've illustrated on these two screens provoke us, I think, to think very differently about what we are and where we are going as 21st century information professionals. The technologies that impinge upon our world are often captured by a partnership between the EDUCAUSE and the Media Coalition, the New Media Coalition. And each year they post a set of technologies that they think are going to have an enormous impact in the higher education and library space. And on this screen and on the next screen, I've identified some of the priority technologies that they think are important. You will note what's not on this list: the library management system. Too often we hang our hat on our library management systems, and I would argue it's moved way down in the list of technological priorities that we need to address and embrace as an information professional community. Whether it be the increasing role and importance of cloud computing, linked data, which I suspect we'll hear a lot about at this conference, the growing importance of smart objects and the Internet of Things, of the importance of electronic books and the challenges which those platforms and applications present to us, the big data and big science phenomena, the growing importance of visualization and simulation and 3D printing. You can come up with your own list of the technologies that are present within the library services that you are providing as information professionals. But our challenge in the 21st century is to embrace and deliver these technologies to the communities that we serve. Given these trends and given these technologies, we have to ask whether the 20th century skills that we have obtained through our education and growth still matter. Do selection, acquisition, synthesis, navigation, dissemination, the work that we do in interpretation, understanding, and use, application, and archiving. The whole concept of delivery, discovery to delivery, is being transformed. How do we make sure that what we do, the centrality of what we do, is not the process of our work, but how it influences and changes and motivates teaching, learning, research, and scholarship? We are taking on many new roles as information professionals. We're learning how to be smart consumers, to negotiate, to work with publishers and vendors in new ways. We are serving as smart intermediaries and aggregators for the communities that we serve, pointing them to the best literature, the honest literature, the appropriate literature for the work that they do. Many of us have become publishers. We have a presence not just in our information literacy work, but as educators on our campuses and educators in our communities. We are learning how to do research and to apply that research to the work that we do and become much more capable to be R&D leaders. We are learning how to leverage our assets of space, content, expertise, and doing that in a far more entrepreneurial way. And we, sometimes, are the only policy advocates representing the public interests in our communities and in our nation. And therefore, we need to learn the difficulties and challenges of being effective policy advocates. So therefore, I would argue we have this pretty extraordinary schizophrenic vision. We will be legacy, responsible for centuries of societal records in all formats. We will be infrastructure, essential combinations of space, technology, systems, and expertise. We will be repository, ensuring the long-term availability and usability of our intellectual, cultural, and scientific output. We will be platform, serving as a sophisticated, intelligent gateway to expanding multimedia, interactive content and tools. We will be enterprise, much more concerned with innovation, business planning, competition, and risk. And we will be public interest, political advocates defending and advancing the public interest in so many critical information policy areas. This hectic and schizophrenic framework in which information professionals will evolve recalls the words of Winston Churchill. To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. It echoes what the Anglican bishop said to the Catholic cardinal. Brother, we both serve the Lord, you in your way and I in his. So one of the important things that we have been doing and will continue to expand is the building of digital libraries. We need to remind ourselves that the quality of this effort will not be defined just by the content, where quality must equal content plus functionality. It's what our users can do with that information. Surely our largest digital library probably remains the published and licensed content that we get from vendors and publishers. But increasingly, we obviously are digitizing large amounts of primary content from our collections. We are beginning to think about collecting open web content. Many of us are taking on the roles and responsibilities of institutional archives and institutional content, research data. More and more of this content is multimedia, it's integrated with services, and it's requiring of software tools in order to use well. Having taken on the digital library responsibility, we must also embrace the preservation and archiving role as well. We must think of preservation function of the information professional as the ability to hold the information. You can't preserve what you don't have. Therefore, the important link with the continuing development of our collections. We need persistence, the continuing ability to access it, to make sure that it is secure and properly curated, and that it is cared for. We have done a relatively bad job with preserving our analog content. We're doing a very bad job with preserving the materials that we have converted, and we are doing no job with the stuff that is born digital. This is a critical challenge, I think, for the information professional community reaching forward. In the context of this born digital arena, the breadth and diversity of this material is extraordinary. One of my missions over the last 24 months has been to give a series of presentations within the US and in areas around the world about this critical area. Whether it's just the licensed and published works that we think are being preserved by publishers, and they're not, the e-video, e-audio, the work of digital government, online learning materials, research data, the whole complexity of social media, e-archives, which continue to come in with collections of papers that we get from individuals and organizations, the vast arena of websites and web documents, and you can see on the next slide the continuation of this extraordinary arena of born digital material. Why is this important? I think our failure as a community to collect, organize, and preserve this content raises fundamental issues of integrity in the scholarly process. If you write a paper, as you will now do, and you cite born digital resources in your sources, and I come to read your paper and I can't find those sources anymore, I have to question the honesty of your work. Therefore, I think we have some fundamental responsibilities to make sure that this stuff is captured and preserved. And it's not just the content. It needs to remain usable. And these are complex objects. I mean, just look at a simple website. It's not text. There's a lot of functionality. There's a lot of interactivity. There's a lot of multimedia. This is not an easy task. This is not a cheap task, but it is a fundamental responsibility of the 21st century information professional. We also need to step aside from the repository chaos we are creating. Think about where people used to deposit their works. They used to put it in the publisher archive, the publisher repository, and that's where we knew where to find it. But now people put it in discipline repositories, institutional repositories, data repositories. Our schools and departments at our universities have repositories. I put it up on my personal website. There are learning repositories. Our governments are asking us to put it on their repositories if they give us a grant. There are some countries' national repositories, research data. I mean, it's chaotic. Which is the copy of record? Which is the one that will get cited? Which is the one that will get read? Which is the one that will get preserved? This, to me, is the critical issue that we face as information professionals. We are the solution to the questions and issues of the repository chaos. Clearly, we are going to be successful as information professionals in the 21st century if we can manage the extraordinary expectations of our researchers in helping them to deal with big data. Our federal and funding agencies are mandating that scholars and researchers take care of their research data. These are massive collections. They are largely unstructured, crying out for curation. What do our scholars want to do? They want to be able to extract that information. They want to distribute it and share it with colleagues around the world. They want to collaborate in the use of that research data. They want to use visualization and simulation tools. And they may, if they're reminded, understand the importance of preserving it. This is a great opportunity, a fundamental opportunity for us as information professionals in the 21st century. We have a lot of conversations with scholars and researchers and faculty, individuals who do research in our communities through public libraries, in our corporate and hospital settings. And what I hear from the conversations that I've experienced and worked through is a new set of expectations for what the information professional can do to make a difference in the quality and impact of a researcher's life. They, I think, want much more guidance and assistance in how to navigate, analyze, and synthesize information. They want to know how to participate effectively in this open research, and how can we work with them to build a much more continuous system of scholarly communication where the research article and the scholarly monograph does not define the end of that research. How do we move from scholarly product to scholarly process? They recognize that we have the ability to help with expert databases, to build subject ontologies, to help them with the management of their data, and how to move into new areas of research, the gray literature that they may be very unaware of and unable to locate. I think what I'm hearing is more of a special library informationalist model in all types of library settings for what the scholar thinks the 21st century information professional can do. We are facing some meta issues as information professionals. We have to deal with these. We have to, where appropriate and as possible, fight against them. Mass surveillance. There's very little that we do online that someone does not observe, capture. Our privacy is a joke. Security meltdowns. As we move from print, and most of us have made massive shifts to electronic and digital, security meltdowns. Network neutrality. This is under attack. I mean, I have been traveling here for 2 weeks. I'm not surprised if I go home and it's gone. The notion that there are preferred paths for individuals and rich people and politically connected people on the World Wide Web, and the rest of us be damned. This is not a good thing. And corporate control. We have ceded discovery to corporations. We have ceded the ownership and control of our content to corporations. This, I think, is among our 21st century information professional challenges, is to out these meta issues and to deal with them in an aggressive, almost warlike way. Charles Kuralt, the late newscaster in the United States, once noted that thanks to the interstate highway system in the United States, I can travel from New York to San Francisco and see absolutely nothing. I'm sure that's true in some areas of Australia. Our users say that infrastructure is critical, but they're also telling us a lot of other things. They want more and better content. They want more and better access. We need to think more about convenience and enabling them to do new things, things they've never been able to do before. Everyone's looking to manage their costs. Everyone wants to participate in their information environments. We want more productivity as individuals and as organizations, and we want to control the information environments in which we work. How can 21st century information professionals deliver on those expectations? I want technology everywhere. I want Wi-Fi that actually works all the time. I don't want to wait on lines. I want web-based services. And I want you, 21st century information professionals, to be there with that information I need when I want it and when I need it. I want playgrounds. I want sandboxes. I want some privacy space. I expect you, information professionals, to make me socially successful. Support services when I need them. Information fluency when I think I need it. One of the biggest challenges we face at universities in the US is when our students leave the university and when they've had this extraordinary information environment, and suddenly 6 months later, their access is cut off and they don't know what to do. We can build capacity to sustain some of those important content. And then career assistance. Clearly, people in our communities who don't have jobs and students who are moving out into the job world can look to us to provide that type of support. We do not draw a line between what we do as information professionals and what I would call the human objectives. How do we know if we are making our users successful, happy, productive, enabling them to make progress and to develop relationships, to have positive experiences, and to have impact in the worlds in which they operate? We need to find the tools and strategies to demonstrate that these are things that where we are making a difference. Surely the quantitative data that we are collecting in many of our libraries does not enable us to really prepare for the qualitative expectations that our users are bringing to us. Our institutions, our governments, those who fund us, are asking very hard questions. We need to prepare for more rigorous accountability and assessment. How do we measure user satisfaction, market penetration? How do we know if we are successful and impactful in our communities? How do we know if we are cost effective and we are developing systems for usability? Several years ago, I did a paper at an ACRL national conference which was entitled "Stop the Madness: The Insanity of Return on Investment as a Way to Measure Library Success." I think it's still a problem. We create these ineffective, naive tools for demonstrating to our communities that we're doing a good job. They can see through them, and I think it raises serious questions and concerns about our credibility and our effectiveness. How are we essential to our communities? How decision makers think we're doing a good job? Do we make a difference in student and citizen success? Do we make a difference in faculty, researcher productivity? Does our campus and community economy look and behave better because of us, what we do? Do we advance and support institutional and community values? And are we extending and enhancing the university and community reputation? We will be effective in this space if we recognize that we have a virtual responsibility. We need to serve our communities whenever and wherever they are. And we also serve them because we are experts. We are virtuoso. We add something to that information relationship with our users. And we are virtuous. We recognize that we can no longer do it institutionally. We need to embrace new ways of working together and representing our users in those public information policy environments. I mentioned R&D. I think this is a critical arena for information policy work as we move forward. R&D, I think, is successful when it captures what we as individuals are interested in, what we as a community of professionals have identified is important, that it responds to the priorities of the organizations in which we work, and that it can serve a national, if not a global need. R&D for me is all about the creation of new knowledge. It creates in our libraries a laboratory for experimentation. It enables us to bring new skills and new capabilities into the work of the library. It's a way we collaborate with faculty and with corporate sector. It helps us solve library problems, solve information problems, and solve technology problems. It focuses us on solutions. It is a potential for technology transfer. It's a way, at least in the States, where we have been able to attract significant amounts of federal and foundation funding. It raises the credibility and visibility of the library. It can be a support for decision making. It changes the organizational culture. It is an important embedded part of our digital library program, and hopefully it creates a sense of organizational risk. I mentioned earlier the importance of moving beyond the important ways we have cooperated in the past. If you think about where your library partners and works with other libraries and organizations, it's an exhaustive arena of partnership that we have developed in libraries all over the world. We are increasingly reaching out to the cultural community, building new partnerships with archives and with museums, and we are promoting new public-private partnerships. But much of this, as I noted earlier, cooperative cataloging, interlibrary loan document delivery, joint licensing of databases, necessary, important, will continue, but falls way short of the radical collaboration that I think we need to be building. We need centers for excellence. We need places that move up in powerful ways through combinations of libraries to create new capabilities, new R&D enterprises, new forms of content, new preservation strategies. Individual libraries cannot do that. Centers for excellence need to be multi-institutional. Mass production. Why does every library in North America have to have an acquisitions department, a cataloging department, a preservation department, a digitization department, blah, blah, blah? When we can consolidate and build more integrated and shared approaches to mass production and move a lot more of those resources into the innovation space, into the R&D space. New infrastructures must be built together. New initiatives, we should reach out and find appropriate partners. One of the interesting projects that I was involved with in the US was a relationship between Columbia University Libraries, CUL, and Cornell University Libraries, CUL. Therefore, our name, Too Cool. And we're ready for Colgate or Catholic University to join us. We already are ready. It's going to be Trey Cool. But the point is, we found ways to build together centers for excellence, to hire staff that worked for both institutions, to build collective collections and new infrastructures together, to apply for grants and to carry out research and development together. It doesn't come without its requirements of assessment. How do we know what we're doing is right? We need to evaluate the quality of that work, the productivity of that work, and the innovation that we are accomplishing. We are at war in the United States. It's only 3 weeks into that war. I promised I wouldn't talk politics today. But this is a relevant issue as we look at the 21st century information professional. We have some important core values, and they're bundled up in what we do at the state, national, and international level to make sure that our users have equitable and effective access to information, that we don't enable violations of intellectual freedom and participate in violations of privacy, enable censorship, shut down speech. Civil liberties are under threat. Our education and research programs, the funding is disappearing. Internet development and telecommunications policy favoring those who can pay and those who are politically connected. The rampant loss of government information. Is a presidential tweet government information? Appropriations, workforce policy, which is bundled up in our new approach to immigration in the US. And most importantly for me, because it's where I have fought for the last 20 years, is the copyright wars and the exceptions and limitations within the US context, the fair use capacity that has been actively supported by the courts, but which has been questioned and attacked from those who control information. This is where I think we have to achieve hope, power, and action through collaboration. We need to be knowledgeable resources for our community. We need to be advocates in the political and legislative forums. We need to educate our communities on these priority issues, document what happens when change in legislation occurs. Promotion in our communities and on our campuses of new coalitions. Sometimes these are ugly partnerships. We find ourselves working with people who we have never considered working with. But the political agenda is complex. The political agenda is difficult. And therefore, we also need to behave in the ways that support our public interest values. Do not enable censorship, violations of privacy, compromising of fair use in the work that we do in our libraries. All of this, I think, has broad implications for library staffing. We are increasingly seeing in all types of libraries more and more professionals with diverse academic backgrounds. Because of the changes and the roles and responsibilities we have as information organizations, we need individuals coming into the work of the library who bring different types of skills and backgrounds and academic credentials. We have this wide range of professional assignments. We're also seeing what we call our support staff in the US and our students taking on the types of jobs that I did when I became a librarian in 1972. And we are building much more messy, fluid organizational structures. This, I think, challenges our values, our outlooks, and our styles of information professional organizations. It changes the way our campus and community understands us, recognizes us, respects us, and I think it drives a lot of our ability to remain organizationally relevant and to have impact. So I'm often asked, Jim, when you interview a person for a job, what are you looking for? And I was asked that question so many times, I decided to make a list. And this is my list, and I think it's our list of what we would try to look for as we hire individuals to work in our information organization. To me, this is the library information professional of the 21st century. And clearly, no one individual is going to bring all of these characteristics and qualities to their assignment in the library. But this package of capacity is defining in terms of our ability to be successful as library organizations, and it's what I think builds the robust, energetic, and successful library organization going forward. I think the bottom the bottom four are the ones that I have put much more focus on going in terms of evaluating everyone who comes into my library organization. Is there's a sense of entrepreneurship, risk-taking? Are they committed to not working in isolation, but in collaboration with their colleagues, both within the local library and on a regional and national basis? Do they have a heartfelt, a soulful commitment to social justice, to the core values of our profession? And do they have the potential to be leaders, and do they have that inspirational capacity? To me, these are fundamental qualities going forward for the 21st century. So, yesterday I participated in a workshop at this conference. And one of the things I tried to do was to translate organizational strategic planning into how we think about our own strategic goals as information professionals. And what I argued at the workshop is that each of us needs to think carefully about these core elements. I should show you what I mean. Why did we join this profession? If we were to reflect back and try to think about that, would we have a good answer? Do we have a clear sense of mission? Why we became librarians? What do we want to accomplish? What is our self-vision? It's not to catalog 20 books tomorrow or to answer 10 reference questions well, although that's important. It's what is our career going to accomplish? What difference are we going to make? What tools enable us to be effective? For most of us, that master's degree in library science or whatever other basic credential is gone. It's inadequate. It's history. Therefore, our continuous improvement, how will we go on and advance and grow and become better at what we do? What's our strategic position? What will be our career path? Every individual who I interview for a job, one of the questions I ask them is not about the job that you're interviewing for now, but if we hire you and you come to our institution, what's the next job you're going to apply for? I want to have individuals thinking about not just the next job, but that career path. And lastly, being a powerful professional voice. How will we serve the profession and make a difference in our communities? One of the challenges I think we have is that we've created pretty ugly organizations in many of our libraries. A conventional administrative hierarchy, sometimes wedded with a consultative bureaucracy and governance structure. I will argue we need to blow it up. We need to go into a structure which is much more built on a centralized planning and resource allocation system with loosely coupled professional structures and an array of maverick units and entrepreneurial enterprises. We want to create messy, fluid organizations, because that's how I think we will be successful in the 21st century. It means we need to redefine the physical, where, the expertise, who, and the intellectual why infrastructure of our information organizations. The geography changes, the psychology changes, and the economics of innovation is important to what we do. I showed this slide at the workshop, and I asked everyone to reflect on their own information organization. Think of each of these bullets as a continuum. Centralization, decentralization, and so forth down the list. Where would you put your information organization along these continuums? Where do you want them to be? What's the gap between where you are and where you want to be? I will argue that the 21st century information organization and those who work in those organizations need to be pushing more of the organizational characteristics to the right, because I believe that's where true innovation, true leadership will take place in our library communities. George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, was opening a new play in London. He wrote a letter to Winston Churchill. He said, "Dear Mr. Churchill, my new play is opening in London, and I would be very happy if you were able to come to the opening night's performance. I send you 2 tickets. One ticket is for you, Mr. Churchill, and one ticket is for a friend, if you have one." Well, Mr. Churchill could not resist and quickly replied and said, "Dear Mr. Shaw, I am honored that you invited me to the opening night's performance of your new play in London, but unfortunately I have another commitment. But I would be very appreciative if you sent me 2 tickets to the second night's performance, if there is one." So I will argue that the library of the future, will there be one, will be very influenced by our ability to move these organizational characteristics to the right. I think that the 21st century information professional is a challenging person to recruit, to retain, and develop. And therefore, I've spent a lot of time researching and focusing on what I call turnover, employee organization linkages. What do I care about as an employee? What's my status in the organization, and what's the quality of that membership? There's a psychological contract that each of us has with those who employ us. There are societal and profession trends which are weakening those bonds. We used to, in the US, champion and applaud those individuals who stayed and worked in libraries for 30 and 40 years. We're lucky if we can hold on to people today for 2 or 3 years and get as much leadership and innovation out of them. Organizational commitment going forward is not clear. Will individuals have a strong belief and acceptance of the organizational goals and values? Are they going to be willing to exert effort on behalf of that organization? And are they going to have a strong desire to maintain membership in that organization? And it's not just about compensation. It's who I work with, the opportunities that are presented, the ability to conceive of and move on interesting projects without waiting for the bureaucracy and the hierarchy of the organization to click in, and several months later to give me permission to do the cool stuff that I want to work on. So therefore, it raises the question of leadership in the 21st century information organization. This is my philosophy of leadership. What do I do most effectively? I set a direction. I work with the others on my campus and in my library to set that direction. I work to hire and develop really great people. I help in securing the resources. I sometimes ask the hard questions. I advance a professional voice on campus and in the larger community, and then I just get out of the way. Too many leaders, too many managers, too many supervisors do not get out of the way. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face in the 21st century information organization. We need to be, as I started outlining, much more focused on innovation. How do we bring new knowledge to new resources to produce new goods and new services? How do we think differently about market, the communities that we serve? How do we lower the cost and increase the benefits of the things that we do? How do we add value? And how do we address problems and unmet needs? How do we become the source of solutions? To me, this is what innovation in the 21st information organization is all about. I encourage you to look at a paper that was published earlier this year by Marina Gorbis in the EDUCAUSE Review. I found this to be one of the most provocative articles I've read recently. It's an approachable article as well, in which she talked about the IT environment that she sees developing in our communities and in higher education. And I think these 5 elements will be very influential going forward in the work environments of the 21st century information professional. Smart machines, the relationship between humans and machines, new relationships with our tools, replacing the routine and the repetitive work. Let's call it robots. The coordination economics, socially structured value creation. Think Uber, think Airbnb, ad hoc teams in the cloud, microtasking and micro-contributing. Think of immersive collaboration, moving from face-to-face to blended reality. Physical and virtual seamless integration. 24/7 teams working on a global scale, performing and productively doing things together. The hacker-maker mindset. Democratizing creation. Community labs. Crowdfunding platforms. And to me, most importantly, the opportunities for globalization and inclusion. Integrating people from other countries, those who have not participated in the global information networks, but have been excluded because of geography and, quite frankly, because of prejudice. The importance of communication in a global information infrastructure. I wondered why you wanted an American to come here to talk to you about these information and professional issues going forward. And so I felt sort of this need to justify myself. I do a lot of teaching, and I found myself a number of years ago teaching a class, a freshman English, and there were a lot of international students in that class. And so I decided to propose to them that they could write a paper on any topic dealing with elephants. And they brought interesting papers back for me to look at and to grade. And the different perspectives of those international students was extraordinary. So the English student, the great student from Great Britain, wrote about elephants and the empire. And the French student wrote about, the love life of the elephant. And the American student, bigger and better elephants. And what do you think the Australian student wrote about? Elephants, a federal or state responsibility. Thank you, I feel justified. Yeah. Ultimately, I think at the base of what I'm talking about is transformation. What we are and what we do, a new sense of composition and structure. How we are viewed and understood in the communities that we serve, and the ways in which we do it. To me, these are the fundamental characteristics of transformation and defining of the ways that we will move forward. Where are we going? Will we have relevance, impact? Will we survive? The issue of extinction comes up occasionally in our conversations about the 21st century information professional. But I went to an off-Broadway show, and I know that there are multiple forms of extinction. There are things like terminal extinctions, where a species disappears from the face of the earth, and there are no descendants, we are gone. And to my surprise, there is something called phyletic extinction, where one species actually evolves into another species. And to me, that was the philosophical and intellectual challenge that I accepted. And that is, how do we, as 21st century information professionals, build a phyletic future? So to acknowledge, and in conclusion, how do we feel? I think we're anxious. I think there's a certain amount of apprehension and fear in our field. Our age of anxiety is in great part the result of trying to do today's jobs with yesterday's tools. We can move beyond that. We feel a sense of disruption. One of the litmus tests is that a disruptive technology enables a larger population of less skilled people, think about our users, to do things that historically only an expert could. We have a new challenge of expertise, a new arena of service that we need to bring to the communities that we serve. And as I opened my talk, chaos often breeds life when order breeds habit. There is a sense of confusion and unpredictability in the complex systems of information work that we will face in the 21st century. So Albert Einstein, when he came to the United States, would never fly in a plane. That actually scares me, facing this long trip back to New York. And he often went around the United States on trains. One day he was on a trip, and the clerk came around the cars of the train to collect the tickets. And suddenly Einstein is digging in his pockets and looking for his ticket, and the young man says, "Oh, Dr. Einstein." Of course, he recognized him. "Dr. Einstein, not to worry, you don't need to look for your ticket, it's okay." But Einstein persisted, and he crawled on the floor, and he lifted up his seat. And again, the young man said, "Dr. Einstein, please get up. You don't need to find your ticket. It'll be okay." Einstein stood up, whirled around, looked him in the eye, says, "Young man, it is no longer a matter of whether I can find my ticket. It's a matter of where I am going." So I encourage us to spend a lot less time looking for our tickets and to have richer, deeper, energetic conversations about where we are going as information professionals in the 21st century. Thank you.
Jim questioned why we invited someone from the US to come and be our keynote speaker. I had the privilege of hearing Jim in 2009 at Gothenburg in Sweden. And at that time, he spoke on radical collaboration and talked about the too cool at that time. 10 years later, almost a decade later, I still reflect on what Jim talked about on that day. And I've had the privilege to hear him speak a number of times. And what he says, I think, comes back to me over and over again. And I'm sure today he's given you a lot to think about and a lot to reflect on. And I think he's very much set up the rest of the conference for us around the theme of data, information and knowledge, but more importantly, our role as information professionals. And I urge you to go back to the slide that he showed on our personal role and reflect on that as well. The good news is that the session has been video recorded and will be available on the IFLA website following the conference, so you have the opportunity to go back and look at it again. Could you please thank Jim again? And Tricia will come up to the podium. Thank you.